What would you do if you woke up one day and found yourself on death row, locked in a freezing concrete box, counting the days until poison hits your vein, even though you never killed anyone, never committed a crime? Marcus Reed knows that day. 6 months from now, the needle will slide into his arm for a murder he didn't commit, and the only thing he's asked for is to see his dog one last time. If that sounds unfair to you, stick around, because what happens next might break you. And if your heart's not strong, brace yourself. Justice doesn't show up quietly. Gray light spills through the narrow window of Brookfield prison. Even the sun seems hesitant to touch what's about to unfold in this small southern town in Texas. Brookfield, once home to war veterans and working-class families of every color, now torn apart by land deals that trade neighborhoods for condos. Guards walk the halls in sync, boots tapping against pale green concrete. Clean, cold, controlled. Marcus Reed lies motionless, chained to a steel bed in solitary confinement. A former Marine. Now, just a night security guard at a shopping center that barely stays open. Convicted of murder? Falsely. 5 years ago, Marcus stood up to Jonathan Price, a real estate mogul who forced poor families to sell and leave. Cheap buyouts. Empty promises. A photo of Marcus' fist raised at a community meeting made the local paper. That moment made him a target. 6 months ago, a judge dropped the gavel. Death penalty. Olivia, his longtime girlfriend, a community nurse, wrote dozens of appeal letters, all denied. One by one, their hopes were crushed. Now Marcus waits, in a place where even light forgets how to shine. A single bulb overhead, flickering, throwing shadows across a worn-out face, wrinkles carved by too many sleepless nights. 6 months left. Unless a miracle shows up, the needle will finish its job. Marcus has only one request: a flicker of light in this pitch-black cell, to see Rocky, the dog he loves more than life itself. He closes his eyes. Memory pulls him back. That night, the night Rocky vanished, Marcus ran through the dark streets of Brookfield, calling his name over and over, no answer. Just the sound of his own breath and a town already asleep. What he didn't know was that search would land him in a grainy security camera frame near Jonathan Price's house, the night a man was murdered. What he didn't know was that someone had planted his shoes. Found in the backyard. Prints matched. What he didn't know was that his old jacket, spotted with Jonathan's blood, was discovered near the scene. Everyday items turned into airtight evidence. Too perfect, too clean, too convenient. A setup so polished even truth looked guilty. "I want to see Rocky before I die." His voice was sandpaper and sorrow, murmured to the guard outside the cell. Rocky, his post-discharge companion, his only family now. "He couldn't protect me that night," Marcus rasped. His leg was hurt. "I just need to know he's okay." Footsteps. Laura Coleman entered, the prison warden. Uniform sharp, stance tighter, but her eyes, they held something softer, fleeting, human. "Reed, we don't usually allow animals in solitary," she said, clipped, "and we'd have to actually find the dog first." "I know," Marcus cut in, his voice cracked in its own surprise. "Rocky's with Olivia, I think. She's been taking care of him." He tried to sound steady, but the lump in his throat betrayed him. "Please," he whispered, "if there's any decency left in this place, let me see him, just once." Coleman didn't speak. She just looked at him, for a long time. Her eyes wavered like water about to break. "I'll see what I can do. But don't get your hopes up, Reed." He nodded. No strength left to beg. Deep down, he still held on to the one thing they hadn't taken, his belief in his own innocence. As Coleman walked away, Marcus caught voices echoing down the corridor. A guard muttered, "Me of them. Half the town wants Reed dead, says he killed Price. The other half, screaming for justice. They think this whole thing's tied to dirty land deals ripping Brookfield apart." Marcus shut his eyes again. The world outside didn't matter anymore. 6 months, maybe less. But if he could see Rocky just once, he could take that light with him into the dark. Marcus Reed shut his eyes. He was still lying on that same cold steel bed. Whatever they were saying out there didn't matter anymore. 6 months left. Unless a miracle happens, the needle ends it all. He forced himself up, legs shackled. Chains clinked with every movement. He walked to the narrow window, craning his neck to catch a glimpse of the sky. A faint ribbon of orange, soft, pale. Morning was coming, and it pulled him back to the early days walking Rocky around the block. He could almost feel the leash tug, hear that excited tail thumping pavement. People used to ask, "You train him yourself?" Marcus would smile. Every bit of it. Rocky wasn't a pet. He was light, the kind that gets you through nights you don't think you'll survive. A knock broke the silence. Reed? Time to move? We're taking you to the end unit. Marcus swallowed hard. My last request, was it approved? Warden Coleman's working on it, the guard replied. But don't count on much. Marcus nodded, held out his wrists. The cuffs snapped shut, cold and familiar. He looked back at the strip of light. Wondered if he'd ever see the full sun again. Olivia Bennett pulled her old sedan in front of the apartment. 6 months of hitting every legal door she could find. Every answer was the same no. The call from the prison was the only yes. It was still dark out. She hadn't slept. Last night's news confirmed it. No delays, no appeals left. Inside, Rocky lay curled on his worn-out bed. At the sound of her keys, he lifted his head, ears alert, eyes heavy with something too human. He hadn't seen Marcus since the arrest, 5 years. But dogs remember silence and loss. Olivia knelt beside him, ran her hand along his fur. He let out a low, aching whimper. Their grief had been shared in silence for too long. She stood, glanced at the stack of letters, appeals, press requests, human rights petitions, all unanswered. Her phone buzzed. A familiar number. Ms. Bennett, said the voice, calm, precise. Laura Coleman. I'm calling about Marcus Reed's final request. He wants to see Rocky. Olivia's grip tightened, her heart pounded. There's no change in the sentence, Coleman continued. But I've approved the visit. If you can bring Rocky by 7 a.m., I'll be there, Olivia said, even though Coleman couldn't see her nod. She hung up and cried, quietly, then wiped her cheeks, reached for the leash. Come on, Rocky. He stood, favoring his left leg, still limping, but his eyes steady, unshaken, as if he knew, this moment is everything Marcus has left. Olivia locked the apartment door. Her hand tightened around the leash. Rocky followed, limping slightly on his left leg, but his eyes focused. Sharp, like he knew this trip wasn't like the others. She opened the door to her old sedan. He jumped into the back seat without a sound. Like always, like never. Olivia slid into the driver's seat, started the engine. Eyes locked on the clock. Not 1 second to lose. Marcus had to see him. The July sky turned soft orange, but to her, it was all gray. Every mile that passed felt like a countdown. She glanced at the mirror. Rocky sat still, back straight, eyes fixed on the window. Now and then he whined, ears twitching, as if he could hear something beyond the hum of the road. You know, don't you? Olivia whispered, we're gonna see him. She gripped the wheel tighter, heart racing. Images swarmed her mind. What if the prison changed its mind? What if she was late? What if this was the last time? Her phone buzzed. Again, friends, news, updates. She ignored it all. Only one thing mattered, fulfilling Marcus's last request. Every light turned green, as if the universe finally understood what she was doing. Brookfield prison came into view. Steel gates, still, cold, drenched in early light. 2 layers of fencing, then movement. A guard stepped up as she pulled in. Olivia rolled down the window. I'm here for Marcus Reed's final request. I brought Rocky his dog. The guard checked the papers, nodded. Side entrance, lot 3. She turned the wheel, parked, reached back, stroked Rocky's head. Stay with me, buddy. He pressed his nose into her palm, eyes locked on the main building ahead. He knew. She closed her eyes, saw Marcus, worn out, thinner. That crooked smile on his left cheek, was it still there? The scent of his old aftershave, was it gone? Tears rose. She wiped them quickly. No breaking down. Not today. Not for herself. For Marcus. For Rocky. The door to the admin wing swung open. Laura Coleman appeared, still rigid in posture, but her eyes softer than usual. Miss Bennett, she said, brisk. Bring Rocky. We don't have much time. Olivia stepped out, opened the back door. Rocky jumped down, still favoring his left leg, but no hesitation, as if he'd been waiting 5 years for this exact moment. They entered the hallway. Bleach, rust, silence. Footsteps echoed on stone, sharp, hollow. Brookfield, a town split in two by Marcus's case, was quiet now, muted behind walls and gates. Olivia leaned down, whispered into Rocky's ear. Just a little longer, bud. You'll see him soon. Ahead, one last door waited. One room. Maybe, their final goodbye. Laura Coleman pushed open the door, her voice softer than usual. Reed, Miss Bennett, and Rocky are here. Marcus looked up, his heart clenched. On the tray, half a slice of bread, a bitten apple, 3/4 gone, soda barely touched. His stomach still ached, but his hands couldn't lift another bite. Not because he was full, because Rocky was coming. This could be the last time. Will he even remember me? Marcus stared at the white-tiled wall. 5 years, a lifetime for a dog. But hope was the only thing prison hadn't stripped from him. Footsteps. The door opened. Olivia stepped in, holding the leash. Rocky followed, older now, scar on his left leg, but strong, steady. He froze, locked eyes with Marcus. Then he charged. A bark, a blur of wagging tail, a whine that broke like glass. Marcus dropped to his knees, arms wrapped around the dog's neck, face buried in fur, tears poured out, no use holding back. "Hey, buddy," he whispered. Olivia stood at the door, hand covering her mouth, trying not to cry. "Marcus?" He looked up. Their eyes met, full of pain, history, and something softer. "I knocked on every door," she said, voice trembling, "but no one would listen." "You did everything," Marcus said. "No one else would have even tried." He took her hand, his other still resting on Rocky's back as the dog licked his face, slow, tender, aching. Coleman stepped back. "Not much time," she said quietly, "but I'll give you 3, some privacy." Marcus nodded. "Thank you. Truly." Olivia knelt beside them, ran her hand down Rocky's back. "He never forgot you," she said. "Not once." Marcus pressed his face into that warm coat, breathed in deep, trying to memorize the smell, the feel, the safety. 6 months left, but no promise of tomorrow. Coleman gently shut the door behind her. Silence returned. Olivia stood, placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "I'll be waiting," she whispered, "till the very end." The door closed. Marcus sat there, Rocky curled beside him. The dog let out a sigh, then rested his head on Marcus's lap like they'd never been apart. "I missed you so much, buddy," Marcus said softly. "I didn't kill Price. Someone else did, and they set me up. No one needed to believe him. Rocky did." He lowered his head, pressed it to Marcus's chest, eyes closed, like saying, "I know." Marcus stroked behind his ear. "If this is the last time, thank you for coming." He shut his eyes, soaking in the breath beside him, the silence, the warmth, no words left. But the room was full of love. It started just days after the visit. Rocky lay down in front of Mike Harris's gate and didn't leave, under the hot July sun, through the steady, whispering rain. There he was, head resting on his front paws, eyes fixed on that weathered gray door. Silent, no barking, no scratching, just waiting. Olivia came, once, then again, each time kneeling, soft voice pleading, "Come home, Rocky." But Rocky would only look at her with those deep, aching eyes, then turn away. Mike first noticed the dog while taking out the trash, a massive Rottweiler, still as stone. He frowned, ignored it. The next day, still there, and the next. One afternoon he saw a woman approach, call the dog. Her voice cracked. Through the fence he saw her face, lit by slanting sunlight, tears clinging to her lashes. Olivia Bennett, Marcus Reed's girlfriend, the one who'd shouted at him in court years ago, and the dog that had to be Rocky. The Rottweiler Marcus mentioned during questioning. "He's my family." Those words echoed now. Mike stood still. A dog like that lying in the heat, refusing to leave, must be waiting for something, or someone. Did no one else see how strange this was? Olivia came 5, 6 more times. Still, Rocky stayed. One evening, Mike stepped onto the porch, leaned against the railing, tapped the wood twice. "You want to come in, buddy?" Rocky lifted his head, his eyes calm, certain. He stood, limped forward. Mike opened the gate, said nothing. Inside the porch, he pulled out an old dog biscuit, set it down. Rocky sniffed, ate, no hesitation. When Mike reached to pet him, Rocky didn't flinch, just lowered his ears and let out a quiet sound, almost like a sigh. That night, he didn't go back out. He lay under the porch chair. Still. Mike sat beside him, coffee in hand, watching Brookfield fade into amber streetlight. And that was the moment he knew something about this case had never been right. It was time to look again. He got up, went inside, turned on the desk lamp, opened the files, scanned transcripts, replayed the interviews, not searching for anything specific, just following instinct. At dawn, his phone lit up. A message from the DA's office. "Reed's appeal denied again. Execution in 5 months." Mike looked out the window. Rocky was still there, eyes open, unblinking. Mike stood, straightened his tie, slipped his pistol into its holster, a habit he never broke, even when he didn't know why. He turned. "You coming?" Rocky rose, limped slightly, but his eyes solid as stone. Mike opened the car door. Rocky jumped in. Brookfield's sky was ash gray, and Mike knew if Marcus Reed still had a chance, it would begin here, with a dog who refused to forget. 2 months after that visit, Mike Harris still couldn't put the case down. Tonight, he sat alone in the back room of his house, A single desk lamp lit the yellowing pages of old files. The air smelled of paper and cold coffee. Brookfield was colder than usual. Rocky lay beneath the desk, head on his paws, eyes open watching something invisible. Not guarding, not resting, just waiting. He no longer slept by the gate. But every night he returned to this exact spot, right next to Harris, like routine with purpose. Mike didn't ask anymore. He knew. The dog was waiting for the truth to be named. He moved the mouse, rewound the civilian cam footage from the alley near Jonathan Price's house. The image was grainy. At 10:42 p.m. a figure moved past, nearly an hour later than Marcus's timeline, too blurry to ID. But the walk something was off. Not Marcus. Too slim, too quick. And the left arm, it was holding something. Rocky stood. A low bark escaped his throat. Mike looked up, narrowed his eyes. You saw that too, huh? He rewound. Paused. Right as the figure raised their hand, Rocky barked again. Left hand. Wrong build. Didn't match Marcus. Mike grabbed a pen, underlined the note. Civic camera, left-hand movement, smaller frame than suspect description. The perfect evidence, bloody shoes, the jacket, the footprints suddenly didn't feel so perfect anymore. He stood, pulled open an old drawer, took out a sealed file box. Again. He flipped through the autopsy report. Nothing new, but this time he wasn't reading to confirm. He was reading to doubt. If that figure wasn't Marcus, then who? He checked the clock. 9:47 p.m. Picked up his phone, dialed the evidence archive. Harris here. I need access to the Jonathan Price case materials. Tonight. A pause. You're no longer with the active team. The execution's in 4 months, Mike snapped. If we're wrong, we're about to kill an innocent man. Silence. Then the voice softened. You've got 30 minutes. Mike didn't hesitate. He grabbed his coat, slid the pistol into its leather holster. Not out of fear. Just habit. Old instincts don't die. Let's go, buddy. Rocky jumped up. Still limping, but steady. He hopped into the back seat like he knew exactly where they were headed. Mike started the engine. Headlights sliced through the mist. Brookfield was silent. But beneath that quiet fog, Mike knew the truth was still breathing. Brookfield. Overcast. Wind slicing across Main Street. Olivia Bennett stood outside the local newspaper office, a folder clutched tightly in her hands. She had just been rejected again. Not enough to run the story, the editor had said, then closed the door like she'd never even been there. She looked down at the folder. Copies of appeal letters, photos from the scene, witness notes from the neighbors. A timeline Marcus mapped out the night he searched for Rocky. Each piece, small and scattered. Not enough to shake a system, but heavy enough to bury a woman who had fought for 5 years straight. She pulled her collar tight, stepped into the rain. Water blurred the ink at the corners, but Olivia held on, as if that folder was the last fragile thread keeping Marcus alive. Late afternoon, she stood outside a familiar suburban house. Mike Harris opened the door. He looked surprised. She didn't say hello. You're still working the case? Her voice was direct, but tired. I am, he said. I've been reviewing footage near Price's house. Someone passed through the alley around the time Marcus said he was out looking for the dog. And I'm starting to think it wasn't him. Olivia held out the folder. I've collected everything I have. Statements from neighbors, rejection letters from the DA's office, my appeal logs, and a photo Marcus sent me the day before he was arrested. Mike took it. His fingers brushed over the damp pages. His eyes narrowed as he read the stamped replies, insufficient grounds. She kept going, voice cracking. I reached out to legal aid groups, independent journalists, civil rights organizations. No one called back. They all said the same thing, no new evidence, no help. She drew a breath. This is it. Just you. And a little time. Mike looked up. Whatever hesitation had been in his eyes was gone. You shouldn't have to do this alone, he said. But I am, Olivia whispered. They sat at the table, files open. Mike scribbled notes. Olivia pulled out a photo. Marcus in the park, holding a burger. Rocky asleep at his feet. That day, he said, if I've got you and him, that's enough. Her eyes welled. I don't want that memory to be the last thing I have. Mike gripped his pen tighter. And I'm not letting this case end as just another rubber-stamped mistake. He stood, dialed a number. I'm meeting with Laura Coleman. If something's stuck in the system, I'll dig it out. Olivia nodded. But as he reached for the door, she added, I won't sit still. If you find something, I'll make this town scream. Marcus will not die in silence. Mike paused, looked at her, then walked out. Outside, the rain had stopped, but Brookfield was still fractured, and in Olivia's eyes, for the first time in months, there was fire. And it wasn't going out. Mike Harris walked slowly, guiding Rocky along the moss-covered stone wall behind what used to be Jonathan Price's house. No court, no jury, no more evidence. Just an old detective and a limping dog chasing the scent of the past through the cold wind of Brookfield. Rocky moved quietly, nose low, inches from the ground, eyes locked, unblinking. Mike saw it, that focus, unshakable, like the dog remembered something still clinging to the soil from that night. They circled to the back of the house. A shuttered window barely open, mud smeared beneath it, faint scratches on the wall, like someone had climbed up and slipped inside. Mike knelt to examine it, just as he turned to call Rocky, a growl. Rocky froze, hackles up. A low, deep bark rolled out. "Rocky?" Mike whispered. No response. The dog turned sharply and bolted back the way they came, through the backyard, into a narrow alley. "Rocky!" Mike chased after him, but by the time he hit the street, Rocky was gone. Empty road, no paw prints, no sound, only puddles and wet concrete. Mike stood there, hands on knees, catching his breath. He scanned the street, nothing. That evening he marked the spot, and for the next 3 days he walked those streets, every crack, every side path, every alley south of Brookfield, until Rocky stopped, in front of an old warehouse, crumbling brick, faded signage, a rusted chain across a rolling steel door. But something was off, fresh footprints. A still warm cigarette butt. A broken cart left behind. Rocky let out a short, sharp bark. Eyes fixed on the door. Mike stood still. The wind rattled the tin roof above them. He reached into his coat, pulled out his notebook, jotted the address. "This place," he murmured, "might be where the truth was buried." He bent down, ran a hand over Rocky's head. Fur was wet, but the eyes steady. "Certain." Mike nodded. Whatever trail they were following, it started here. And it wasn't letting go. Brookfield. Fog thick as smoke. Inside a small office, buried in case files, Mike Harris sat motionless, hands gripping the edge of his desk. Rocky lay by his feet, eyes open, silent, like a shadow that never left. The message on his screen glowed. Appeal denied. Execution scheduled in 60 days. Mike looked away from the screen, stared out the window. Town outside blurred all gray light and morning silence. In his mind, Marcus's voice echoed. From the interrogation room. That look in his eyes. Didn't kill anyone. Back then, Mike thought it was just another denial. Now it haunted him. The door burst open. A young officer stepped in, face tight. "Lieutenant Ballard says to stop working the Reed case. Official reason insufficient evidence." Mike didn't flinch. Not surprised. "You gonna let it go?" "No," he said, standing. "I'm gonna move faster." The officer hesitated. "You still have access to the archives?" "I don't need access." Mike's voice was low. "I need answers." He turned back to the desk, opened a folder. Jonathan Price's financials and real estate records. Red ink filled the margins. Projects locals protested. Links to 3 shell corporations. But the names behind them? Still hidden. Rocky lifted his head, let out a low whine. Mike paused, looked down. "All right, buddy, I get it." He opened another drawer, pulled out a separate file, footprint photos, forensics reports, maps of every camera near Price's house. That's when it hit him. The camera covering the back alley captured a figure. Wrong direction. Didn't match Marcus's timeline. If it wasn't Marcus, then who? He underlined the note. Camera 3, 8:13 p.m. Tall figure, narrow shoulders, fast movement, face unclear. Rocky stood, moved to the door. "I know," Mike said. "But first we bring this to light." He grabbed his phone, dialed the DA's office. "This is Mike Harris. I have evidence calling the Reed conviction into question. Sending a preliminary report now. If I'm right, we don't have 60 days. We need to pause the execution. Today." Rocky sat beside the desk, eyes fixed on Mike. Outside, the fog hadn't lifted. But inside, Mike Harris, everything was clear. Justice isn't just about the truth. It's about not letting go while the truth is still being buried. Brookfield was heavy with cloud, low sky, a storm waiting to fall. The old community hall, once packed with protests against housing projects, was full again. Plastic chairs, damp paper smell, cold coffee, eyes that were half doubt, half hope. No cameras, no press, just one voice, and one shot at being heard. Olivia Bennett stood on the worn wooden stage, gripping Rocky's faded leather collar in both hands. Marcus Reed did not kill Jonathan Price. That's how she opened, her voice gravel, but steady. "He was a Marine, my partner. A good man. The last kind of person who deserved to be framed for a death he didn't cause. Murmurs rose. Then a man in the middle row stood, the shoes, the bloody jacket. What more do you need? Olivia didn't flinch. She held up Rocky's collar. That night, Marcus was out looking for this dog. Rocky spent weeks camped outside Detective Harris's door as if to say, "Don't forget my human." An older woman nodded. A girl wiped away a tear. But then, feelings aren't facts. You sure you're not being played? Olivia reached into her bag, pulled out a water-stained folder. I'm not here asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to listen. She held it up. Statements from neighbors, civilian camera footage, timeline charts. Not to make conclusions, but to raise questions. She looked across the crowd. If Marcus dies quietly, then we put him in that chair. Silence. Then a few claps. Scattered, slow, but one head nodded, then another. No one walked out. Outside, the rain finally came. Mike Harris stood under the overhang, hands in the pockets of his dark coat. You did better than I expected, he said. Olivia shrugged. They listened. But not enough. Enough to make some people uneasy. She nodded. You find anything at the warehouse? Harris glanced around, lowered his voice. Back door's been pried, wiring pulled. Rocky went wild just like he did with the evidence jacket. Olivia gripped the collar tighter. Someone's been there, Harris nodded, reached into his coat, held out a crumpled note. You get this today? Sloppy handwriting. Stop digging or end up like Price. Olivia's voice dropped. Someone slipped it into my bag. After the meeting. Harris folded the note, jaw clenched. Take Rocky home. Let me handle the rest. She gave a small nod. But as she turned to leave, he knew she wouldn't stop, and neither would he. In solitary confinement, time didn't move the way it used to. It dripped, slowed, then stopped like a dead clock still trying to twitch one last second. Marcus Reed sat motionless on the steel bed, back against the wall, eyes locked on a crack in the tile third from the left. Every day he counted them again, like they were the last words the world would ever whisper to him. He didn't write, didn't pray. Sometimes he leaned just enough to catch the slice of sky through that narrow window. The sun never stayed longer than 15 minutes. His breakfast sat untouched, metal tray cold, a piece of bread crushed in his palm, a sugar cube balanced between his fingers. He didn't eat it. The only thing he swallowed was solitude. In the monitoring room, Laura Coleman stared at the screen. Camera 7. Marcus's cell. Every morning she turned it on for a few minutes, not out of protocol, for a reason she didn't have a name for. Marcus did nothing, just sat, staring at the wall, and somehow that silence unsettled her more than rage ever could. A man that, close to death, still clear-eyed, still not angry, still not blaming grade. That was what terrified people like her the most. She stood, walked the hall, stopped at the viewing glass outside Marcus's cell. His eyes hadn't changed. She looked for another second, then turned away. Down the main corridor, 2 young guards whispered. You see the article this morning? Yeah. Brookfield Post ran the Reed story again. My mom texted me the link, said, if they kill the wrong man, this town won't stay quiet. There's a protest outside now. Half of them want to delay the execution. The other half just keep saying, law is law. I just want my shift to end, one muttered. Execution or not, it doesn't change my paycheck. Another guard passed by, overhearing. Actually, it changes how we see what we do here. Olivia Bennett sat in darkness, curtains drawn, cold coffee on the table, appeal letters stacked neatly, unread, unnecessary now. She had done everything, knocked on every door, screamed into every silence. And even if the world kept saying no, Olivia never doubted one thing. Marcus wasn't a killer. She knew it the way she knew her own heartbeat. And now, like a storm running out of wind, she stepped back, not to surrender, but because Marcus had to go, she wanted his last image of her to be soft eyes, not trembling hands behind prison glass. Across town, South Brookfield, Mike Harris sat in his kitchen, hands wrapped around a cold mug, eyes locked on the map of Price's house. Rocky lay close, head on pause, eyes open, ears alert. We missed something, Mike muttered. A mark, a scratch, one miscalculation that could flip everything. He couldn't wait anymore. He whistled. Rocky jumped up, straight into the car. No hesitation. Mike parked across the street, 3 houses down from the old Price home. He nodded at Rocky's stay, then crossed the street. No warrant, no backup, just instinct for one last time. He climbed the back fence, hands pressed into mossy brick. The kitchen window still cracked open. He landed in the yard, soft, quiet, then froze. His boot had left a print, deep in the wet soil, 0.5 centimeters. Mike blinked, a flash in his memory, depth of compression. He crouched, measured, whispered, "Wait, that's not right." 20 minutes later, he was back in his office, mud on his coat. He flipped through files, hands shaking until he found it. Crime scene report. Soil depression, 0.5 centimeters. Estimated weight of subject, 70 kilograms 3. He underlined it in red. Mike looked down at himself, 91 kilos. Marcus Reed's prison health file, 95 kilograms. Right-handed, 182 centimeters tall. Mike froze. No way. The person who left that print was at least 20 kilos lighter. He grabbed the file, ran for the car. That Mike Harris filed an emergency motion to delay the execution. The next morning, a message arrived at Brookfield prison. Stay of execution, 30 days. Pending new investigation. New evidence raises doubt about the suspect's identity. Insufficient to declare Marcus Reed innocent. Death row. A guard entered the cell. Marcus looked up, voice gravel dry. "What's going on?" The guard paused, then gave a single nod. "You've got 30 more days." Marcus didn't smile, but in his eyes for the first time in months, a flicker of light. Not much, just enough to keep waiting. Brookfield. Hot. Air, thick, like it hadn't moved in days. Breathing felt like lifting weight. Mike Harris didn't slow down after the execution was delayed. 30 days wasn't a break, it was a deadline. A countdown either to truth or to watching Marcus die anyway. Back at the Brookfield PD, he requested the full archive of footage from the Price crime scene, stored for over 5 years. One clip stood out. A camera across from Jonathan Price's back door captured a figure. Tall, narrow shoulders, fast stride, wearing a hooded coat, face hidden. "Not Marcus," Mike muttered. "He doesn't move like that, doesn't look like that." He zoomed in, pixelated, still useless. He dumped the entire footage onto a hard drive. That night, he sent it to an AI image enhancement lab in Austin. "We'll reconstruct motion with AI," the tech guy said, "but it'll take time." "Move fast," Mike said. "Someone's life is running out." But he didn't wait. While the footage processed, Mike dug into the warehouse trail. A few calls and a red flag hit. Titan Urban Group. They owned the warehouse. A real estate firm, one of Jonathan Price's biggest competitors. Not just strange, dangerous. The building was still active. Quiet. Too quiet. No signs. Doors always shut. No labels. The men going in all big, all wearing earpieces. None of them talked. Not normal. Not for storage. 2 days later, Mike brought Rocky back to the area. The alley behind the warehouse was narrow, fence rusted, sun brutal. Then Rocky jerked hard, growled, bolted forward. Mike stumbled a few steps, yanked by the leash. He didn't understand until he saw someone ahead. A figure had just turned the corner. Mike saw the dog and ran. Mike didn't see the face, but he saw the hair, long, dark, fast. The figure disappeared right near the Titan warehouse. Mike froze. Something wasn't right. And whatever Rocky smelled, whatever just ran, wasn't supposed to be there. Not anymore. Mike stopped, breathing hard. His eyes narrowed. "That's him," he whispered. Rocky growled, leash tugging hard. Mike reeled him in. "Not now, buddy. Next time." He couldn't wait anymore. The next morning, before dawn broke, Mike dressed in black. Baseball cap. Light rubber soles. Rocky stayed home. Too risky. One bark could blow it all. Mike climbed the roof of the building, next to Titan's warehouse. Belly low. Hands steady, heel to the edge, then dropped down into a pile of scrap. The air reeked of rotted wood, old paint, and grease. He stayed down, hidden in busted cardboard. Finger on the shutter of the long-lens camera he'd prepped the night before. He waited. At 8:03 a.m., the warehouse door slid open. 5 men walked in, one of them tall, narrow shoulders, hair tied back, dark blue shirt. Mike locked on. Raised the camera, focused, click, flash. His heart stopped. The flash was still on. All 5 heads turned. "What the hell was that?" someone shouted. They scanned the space floor to ceiling. Mike froze, didn't breathe. Sunlight pierced through a few rusted holes in the roof, casting random, jagged beams. "Probably just sun glare," one of them muttered. They cursed, then turned back to their conversation too far for Mike to hear. He exhaled, shut the flash. Silent now. He raised the camera again, zoomed in. Photos. No sound, no light, just the face. Or close enough. He stayed hidden until noon, waited until they stepped out for lunch. Only then did he crawl back out the way he came, soaked in sweat, hands raw, belly scraped from hot tin. But in his mind only one thought. Every second mattered for Marcus. That night, he reviewed the photos. A side profile, blurred by heat, but sharp enough, a small scar behind the left ear. Mike opened the Brookfield PD database, searched former suspects tied to violent crimes and real estate muscle work. One name lit up. Victor Shaw, employee at Titan Urban Group, former bodyguard, history of assault, investigated more than once, never convicted. Mike sank into the chair, fingers clenched. He turned. Rocky lay nearby, ear pressed to the floor, dozing. And for the first time in 5 years, Mike believed they were getting close. The final video had been enhanced. Mike Harris leaned in, eyes locked on the screen. And there it was, clearer than ever. A figure in a long coat, left hand gripping a knife, scaling the back fence of Jonathan Price's house. The man moved fast, hugged the wall, slipped through the back door, his face still hidden, but his movements familiar. Too familiar. Mike's heart pounded. It wasn't Marcus. He knew it in his bones. 24 hours left. Marcus Reed was moved to the death watch cell. Bare walls, flickering yellow bulb. A tray waited on the table, his final meal. He had chosen it himself. Simple things. The kind he, Olivia, and Rocky used to share on quiet afternoons. Grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, slice of apple pie. He barely touched it. Every time he lifted his hand, he saw them, the three of them on the old porch, laughing while Rocky tried to steal the potatoes. Now, he was alone. Outside, Olivia and Rocky were granted their final visit. She sat on the floor of the waiting hall, clutching the worn leather leash. Eyes red, tears constant. She had promised herself she'd be strong, but grief didn't care. Rocky looked up at her, his eyes a mirror of pain, ears down, a soft whine. A guard approached, nodded. It was time. Inside, Marcus sat still. The door creaked open. Rocky rushed in first, buried his head in Marcus's lap. Marcus held him tight. Olivia followed. Her gaze froze on Marcus's face, thinner, pale. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She shook her head, then collapsed into his arms. No words, only the sound of breathing, of holding on, of not letting go even if time was running out. 6 hours left. Marcus was escorted out for a shave, a haircut, a final shower. He returned wearing a fresh uniform. On the table, a pack of cigarettes, a pen, a blank sheet of paper. "Write whatever you want." He stared at the page. Then he picked up the pen. The first line shook, but the rest poured out. He wrote about childhood, about the war, about Rocky, about Olivia, about injustice, and the faith he never let go of. A single tear landed mid-sentence. Ink bled across the page. 4 hours left. Mike Harris was the only one still running. He downed a glass of milk, lit a cigarette, his eyes bloodshot after 2 nights with no sleep. Photos from the AI-enhanced video were spread across the table. He looked at one of them, Victor Shaw, leaning against a wall, smoking. Something clicked. Left hand. Mike looked down. His own cigarette sat in his right hand. Victor's? Left-handed? He replayed the video. The killer held the knife in his left hand. Mike jumped to his feet, grabbed the autopsy report, the stab wound off center, from an unusual angle. Not enough to specify handedness, but the entry path lined up with a left-handed strike. He remembered Marcus signing his name in the interview. Right hand. Back to the prison medical file. Height 6'4", weight 210 pounds, dominant hand right. Mike shouted, like a kid who just cracked a puzzle. He picked up the phone, called the Justice Department direct. "I have new evidence. The execution must be halted now." 30 minutes later, the second stay of execution was granted. Marcus Reed was pulled back from death by seconds, still not exonerated. But the court ordered full investigation to restart. At the prison, Laura Coleman stood watching the feed. Marcus still sitting there, head in hands, tears still fresh. She turned away. No one forgot that afternoon, an afternoon when justice was rescued by a glance, a cigarette, and one man who refused to let go. And Mike Harris knew Marcus's name would be cleared. Soon. After Marcus's second stay of execution, Brookfield prison stayed silent. Heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Laura Coleman stood behind the steel door, watching him through the glass. Marcus sat still on the bed, staring at the floor, like hope had finally gone quiet. No words. She turned, walking slow down the corridor. Far off, 2 guards whispered, "They delayed it again? Heard something's off with the case. Doesn't matter, they're just buying time." Out in a small suburban office, Mike Harris placed a hand on the latest file, his eyes sunken from too many nights awake. He filed an official motion, request for independent forensic review. The court approved. A new panel was assigned, veteran pathologists from 3 separate units and a federal crime scene analyst. The hearing took place 3 days later in a sealed room at the State Forensic Center. Harris sat at the far end of the table, knuckles tight around his pen. On screen, a 3D reconstruction of the crime scene. Angles, blood trajectory, victim's position. One expert stood, voice steady. Given the distance, tight quarters, and the diagonal stab from right shoulder to left side, the killer had to strike with power and precision. In all simulations, that required a dominant left hand. Then the enhanced AI video, a masked man, scaling the fence, left hand holding a knife, slipping through the back door. A second expert stood, nodded. The wound matches the movement. This isn't theory anymore. The killer was left-handed. Silence filled the room. Then one forensic pathologist signed the report. Then another, and another. Unanimous. The conclusion was clear. Mike Harris left just as the sun dipped behind the hills. Hot wind pressed against his coat. He climbed into his car. Rocky looked up from the back seat. Mike exhaled, voice low. "We did it, buddy, but Marcus isn't free yet. Not until the world says it out loud." After the court officially reopened Marcus Reed's case, the tension inside Brookfield prison started to leak outward. But no one expected the next target would be Olivia. It started with anonymous messages always around midnight. "Know your place. Stay silent if you want to live. You have no idea who you're up against. If you want Reed to die quietly, stop digging." At first, Olivia dismissed them, cowards behind screens. Until night 3. A trash bag showed up on her doorstep, shattered glass, a dead rat. Spray paint across the gate. "Shut up." She started jumping at every sound, waking in the middle of the night, breathless. Rocky stayed by the window for hours, growling at anyone who passed. She finally called Mike Harris. Voice cracked, shaking. "I don't know how much more of this I can take, Mike. I just wanted to protect Marcus. But now?" Silence on the line. Then, firm as steel. "Pack your things. You're not staying there another night." The next morning, Harris met with Laura Coleman at Brookfield. He didn't need to say much. "Olivia's being threatened," he said. "She's the only person fighting for Marcus besides me. I need your help." Coleman paused, then nodded. She arranged for Olivia to stay in an unused staff unit right beside the admin block. A former senior staff residence. No one outside the prison even knew it was still operational. "We won't list her location," Coleman said. "We'll rotate guards. She'll be safe here." Rocky, meanwhile, would stay with Harris. He needed him, more than ever. And no one yet knew what the dog was about to do next. But Harris did. He looked down at Rocky resting at his feet. "This isn't over," he murmured. "Not even close." Since the court ordered a full reinvestigation, Mike Harris had one focus: Victor Shaw. He didn't need a badge, just instinct and time. In his gut, he knew when pressure hits, people make mistakes, and Shaw was starting to sweat. One night, just past midnight, Shaw slipped out of his house. No lights, no noise, just a cloth bag in hand, his eyes darting like a man who knew he was being hunted. He got into his car, no headlights, and drove. Harris followed, lights off, trailing by nothing but the glow of street lamps. Shaw pulled into the Titan warehouse, the same one Rocky had growled at months ago. He went inside, only a few minutes, then came out carrying something new, eyes scanning, paranoia in every step. He got in, drove off. Harris followed at a safe distance, keeping 500 meters back. The car turned toward the western edge of Brookfield, a place no one went, except the addicts and the desperate. Shaw parked, got out. Still holding the bag, still looking over his shoulder, he walked into the trees. Harris stayed put, lights off, heart pounding. 20 minutes later, Shaw returned. No bag, sweat on his face, a flicker of panic in his eyes. He drove away. Harris waited, then eased the car door open. "Let Rocky out. Go," he whispered. Rocky took off, nose to the dirt, tracking. 10 minutes later, he stopped, started pawing at a pile of leaves. Harris moved in, gloves on, used a branch to scrape the surface, freshly turned soil. He dug, a black plastic bag. Inside, a folding knife, black handle, blades scratched. Harris sealed it instantly, bagged, labeled, evidence. That same night, he drove it straight to the forensic lab. The results came in before sunrise. A trace of dried blood deep in the hinge. DNA match, Jonathan Price. Microscopic, but real. And on the handle, smudged but intact, a fingerprint. Victor Shaw. The system flagged the match. A warrant was issued. At dawn, Shaw was arrested at his home. No struggle, just confusion, like the world had moved without him. At the station, he sat through hours of silence, stone-faced, until they showed him the knife. His expression broke, just a crack, then a long breath, a defeated sigh, and 30 minutes later, he started talking. In the interrogation room at Brookfield PD, fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Cold metal table. Victor Shaw sat across from Mike Harris, wrists cuffed, face pale. No swagger, no smirk. He knew. The net had closed. Hours passed in silence until finally Shaw spoke. I was hired by one of Crestline's senior partners. He didn't blink, voice flat. They wanted Jonathan Price gone. He started having doubts considering pulling out of the South Brookfield clearance deal. That would have cost them tens of millions. Harris said nothing, just listened, jaw tight. I'd done work for them before. Nothing this big, but this one was clean cut, no trail, no ties. But even clean jobs need a story. And I had the perfect one. Shaw glanced up. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. There was that old article, Marcus Reed throwing a punch at Price at a community meeting. Big guy, ex-military, black, had a history with the victim, perfect scapegoat. He paused, then leaned back. I jumped the back fence, came in from the blind spot, knife in my left hand. One strike fast, deep, right under the ribs. Didn't even see it coming. I slipped out. No one saw a thing. Shaw's eyes flicked toward the wall, like remembering a checklist. Then I drove to Marcus's place. I'd scouted him, knew he kept his shoes and jacket out on the balcony, unlocked. I took them, wiped some blood on, and dumped them near the scene. Perfect frame job. Harris's jaw tightened. Shaw kept going flat tone, like reading off a script. When the case reopened, I got nervous. Me and some guys they hired started texting Olivia Reed's girlfriend. Threats, trying to scare her quiet. I had them throw a bag at her door one night. Broken glass. Dead rat. Just to send a message. A second officer at the table typed everything, expression unchanged. Harris asked, "The knife?" Shaw sighed. I kept it. Until it got hot. I went to the warehouse, grabbed it, took it out to the woods, buried it under some leaves near the trail. He looked up, eyes tired. I didn't think he'd be watching, didn't count on the dog either. His voice cracked barely. I didn't think this would go that far. It was just a job. Harris sat back, voice like ice. No, it was a life. And 5 years of hell for a man who never touched that knife. Shaw said nothing, lowered his head. Only the sound of pen on paper broke the silence. The confession matched everything. Left-handed knife strike. Entry angle confirmed, Marcus's items planted, motive, millions at stake, threats against Olivia admitted. The truth was now official. And justice late, but unstoppable, was on its way. Brookfield County Courthouse was packed. The most watched trial in a decade. News crews filled the first 2 rows. For the first time since Marcus Reed's death sentence 5 years ago, cameras were allowed in the courtroom. Victor Shaw sat at the defense table, head bowed, flanked by 2 of his own men already pled guilty to conspiracy, intimidation, and evidence tampering. At the back of the room, a legal representative from Crestline, the company that hired Shaw, sat pale, silent. Marcus Reed sat beside his lawyer. Olivia Bennett held his hand. And Rocky, permitted in court as an emotional support animal, lay silently at his feet, eyes locked on Shaw. The judge struck the gavel. Court is now in session. The prosecution began. They laid it out piece by piece. The murder weapon recovered, bearing Shaw's fingerprints. The stab angle and entry matched a left-handed assailant. Marcus's shoes and jacket were planted. Traffic cam footage placed Shaw near the crime scene that night. The threats to Olivia were traced back to devices used by Shaw's crew. Then came the key footage. Shaw's own words, "I knew Marcus had gone viral for confronting Price. All I had to do was take his shoes, his jacket, and this town would believe it was him." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Marcus's attorney stood. "Your Honor, we present an independent alibi witness." From the back row, a man in a white coat rose. Gray hair, calm voice. "My name is Dr. Thomas Ellison. I'm a veterinarian. Around midnight on the night of the murder, Marcus Reed brought his dog Rocky to my clinic with a severe leg injury. I have the intake form and security footage with timestamps." He held up the documents, signed, verified, perfectly aligned with the window of the murder. "I remember clearly. I served in the military. I know the look of a man who's lost everything but still fights. Marcus Reed is not a killer. He was with me that night." The prosecution reviewed the documents, nodded in acknowledgement. The room fell into hushed silence. Then murmurs. Then a hum rising in volume. The judge turned to Marcus. Voice steady, but gentler now. Based on all presented evidence, sworn testimony, and confirmation from independent experts, this court finds that Marcus Reed did not commit murder. The previous conviction is vacated. Marcus Reed is declared not guilty, his name, his record, his citizenship rights fully restored. 5 years of silence, 5 years of stigma, gone. And for the first time in that courtroom, Marcus looked up and smiled. Rocky at his feet let out a soft exhale, still watching, still there. The gavel struck and the room erupted. Olivia burst into tears. Rocky barked, leaped into Marcus's lap. Marcus pulled him in, arms wrapping around both Rocky and Olivia. Tears streamed down his face. He didn't try to stop them. At the back of the courtroom, Mike Harris clapped. Slow, deliberate. Then more people stood. Applause growing. Quiet, but full of relief. The sentences came fast. Victor Shaw, life without parole. His 2 men, 2 and 3 years for intimidation and obstruction. Crestline's representative, indicted for premeditated conspiracy to murder, awaiting federal trial. When the judge stepped down, the courtroom didn't move. No one dared speak, as if the moment might vanish if broken too soon. Marcus stood at the defense table. No handcuffs, no chains, no stares of suspicion. He looked up toward the high ceiling. Above the skylight Texas sky. For the first time in 5 years, he saw it without bars. Olivia ran to him, wrapped her arms around his chest, shaking. Marcus held her, couldn't speak. His chest rose and fell on the edge of sobbing, on the edge of collapse. Rocky patted over, nudged Marcus's leg. Marcus knelt, opened his arms. Rocky buried into his chest, let out a soft whine like untangling 5 years of silence. Marcus whispered into his fur. We did it, buddy. Behind them, some stood, some wept, some clapped, quietly like they didn't want to disturb the sacredness of what just happened. A few bowed their heads, ashamed they'd once believed he was guilty. Marcus stepped away from Olivia and walked to Harris. Eyes red, no words needed. Marcus reached out. Harris took his hand. Tight. I won't let anyone else go through what you did, he said. Nearby, Laura Coleman stood, no longer stern, just still. Marcus walked up, held her gaze, then gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Thank you, he said, for letting me see Rocky, and for not turning away. Coleman's lips pressed into a line. She nodded, softly. Go, Reed. Freedom's waiting outside. The courtroom stilled again as Marcus walked out, Olivia beside him, Rocky at his heel. He paused at the door. Looked back one last time. No rage, no bitterness, just the eyes of a man who had climbed out of darkness carrying only gratitude and a future. The Brookfield Community Hall was full, every seat taken, people standing in the aisles. Marcus Reed stood at a simple wooden podium. Behind him, the Texas state flag. Olivia sat in the front row, arms wrapped around Rocky. The Rottweiler now a symbol of truth. Mike Harris leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, eyes locked on Marcus. Marcus held the mic. Voice steady, low. I used to be a Marine, a man of peace. Then I became a criminal, because of a lie. He paused, scanned the crowd. But I wasn't alone. That woman Olivia never let go of me. He pointed gently, and Rocky, the dog who once limped from injury, saved my life with nothing but loyalty. His eyes found Harris. Mike Harris, a man who once doubted me, stood up when no one else would, then turned toward another figure in the back. And Laura Coleman, the prison warden, who chose to listen to her heart before her rulebook. All 4 of them, they're the reason I'm standing here today. Applause broke out. Long, loud. An older man stood, voice shaking. Thank you, Marcus, for surviving and for telling the truth. Marcus nodded, his voice dropped to a hush. Brookfield once stayed silent in the face of injustice. Not anymore. My case wasn't just a mistake. It was a warning about power, about systems, and about the people we forget. He rested a hand on Rocky's back. We can't change the past, but we can protect the future. Listen to each other, ask questions, and never ever be afraid to speak the truth. Rocky lifted his head, as if he understood. A little girl walked up from the crowd and patted his ear. The room burst into soft laughter, something real, something healing. Mike Harris exhaled, nodded to himself. For the first time in years, he felt at hope. Every morning, Marcus Reed walked through the park with Olivia Bennett and Rocky. The same park in Brookfield that now had a new name, Rocky Park. A stone plaque near the gate read, "In honor of the dog who saved a man from the silence of injustice." Children played. Parents smiled. Elders watched from wooden benches. Brookfield had changed. The city government grew more transparent. Local media hosted open community forums, and a new nonprofit was born, Second Light. It offered legal aid, advocacy, and education for the wrongly accused. Mike Harris served as an advisor. For Marcus, the biggest change was freedom. They bought a small home on the edge of town, just big enough for three. Rocky had his own bed, but now and then, he snuck out at night, just to sleep by Harris's fireplace. Marcus chuckled. He thinks you're his second dad. Harris just smiled. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. One afternoon, Marcus sat on the porch, pen in hand, writing. Olivia tended the garden. Rocky lay nearby, eyes half closed. Marcus whispered, Shaw took 5 years from me, but the truth gave me the rest back. And the best part of it? Is you. Is Rocky. Is this. Olivia came over, took his hand. Together, they looked toward the park. A group of school kids laughed around Rocky's statue. This was the story of Marcus, of Olivia, and Rocky. One man, one unshakable heart, and one loyal dog. Together, they fought back against silence, and won. And you? Where do you live? Have you ever witnessed an injustice that no one spoke up for? Have you ever wanted to speak out but felt like no one was listening? Tell us, in the comments. We're here to listen, and to tell your story so the light never goes out in the corners where truth hides. If you've seen a journey like Marcus's, share it. Your voice might be the spark for someone else's justice. If you believe justice starts with compassion, subscribe to the channel. Every share is a candle. Let's light the dark one story at a time. Thank you for listening.